He rode into town for supplies and left with a bride who changed his life forever. Jake Carson's horse stumbled on the ridge, blood seeping through his shirt from a gunshot wound. The Kane gang was 2 days behind him, and he needed supplies before they caught up. Red Creek shimmered below in the afternoon heat, a small town that might be his salvation or his grave. He rode down Main Street, clutching his wounded side. People stared at the dusty stranger, their eyes full of suspicion. Jake tied his horse outside the general store and pushed through the door, his vision blurred at the edges as fever took hold. The shopkeeper looked up from his ledger. Before Jake could speak, a woman's voice cut through the air. She was young, with auburn hair and sharp green eyes. "He's been shot," she said. "Papa, get the medical kit." Jake's knees buckled. The woman caught him, guiding him to a chair in the back room. Her name was Claire Patterson, and she handled the town's medical needs since the old doctor died. She cut away his shirt, revealing the infected wound. Her hands worked quickly, cleaning and stitching with practiced efficiency. "Who shot you?" she asked. "The Kane gang. I witnessed something I shouldn't have. They rode through 3 days ago, asking about a stranger." Claire tied off the last stitch. "They'll be back." Outside, horses thundered into town, too many riders moving too fast. Claire's hands never faltered as she gathered supplies. "My father will stall them, but not for long." She pressed bandages into his hands. Back door through the storage room. Jake heard boots on the wooden planks, voices demanding answers. He looked at this stranger who'd risked everything to help him. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "I don't even know you. In 30 seconds, those men will realize your father's lying. They'll question everyone who helped me. You think they'll let you walk away after stitching me up?" The front door burst open. Her father's voice rose in protest. Claire grabbed a small bag from under the counter. She looked at the store, at her quiet life, then at the bleeding stranger offering an impossible choice.
"Horses are out back,"
she said. They ran through the storage room into a narrow alley. Claire's mare waited where she always tied it. Gunshots cracked behind them as they mounted up and rode hard for the hills. Claire had never fired a gun in anger, never broken the law, never left Red Creek in her entire life. Jake led them through canyons he'd scouted earlier. The gang's voices faded, but he knew they'd pursue. These men were hunters who never gave up. As the sun set, they stopped beside a hidden stream. Claire slid from her horse, legs shaking. "What did you witness?" she asked. Jake met her eyes. "I saw them murder a federal marshal and his family outside Dodge City. The marshal was carrying evidence about corruption that reaches the territorial governor. I grabbed his journal before they saw me." He patted his saddlebag. "This could bring down powerful men in 3 territories?" Claire sat down hard. "And you rode into town carrying that?" "I was dying from infection. Needed supplies to reach the federal courthouse in Santa Fe." "How many in the gang?" 8 that I've seen. Their leader is Victor Kane. Smart, patient, ruthless. He won't stop until I'm dead and that journal is burned. They made camp without a fire." Claire shared what food she'd grabbed. 2 strangers bound together by violence and impossible circumstances. "Tell me about Red Creek," Jake said eventually. Claire was quiet. A safe life. Predictable. I was the spinster daughter who never married because I was too busy keeping everyone healthy. Respected but invisible. She looked at the stars. I told myself I was content. And now? Now I'm terrified and probably making the worst decision of my life. She smiled slightly, but I'm not bored. The storage room led to a narrow alley where Claire's mare waited. Jake could hear the gang ransacking the store inside. They mounted up and rode hard toward the hills, gunshots cracking behind them. Claire had never fired a gun in anger, never broken the law, never left Red Creek. Now she was racing into the wilderness with a wanted man, and the strangest part was feeling more alive than she had in years. Jake led them through canyons he'd scouted on his way into town. The gang's voices faded behind them, but he knew the reprieve was temporary. These men were hunters who never gave up once they caught a scent. As the sun set, they stopped beside a stream hidden deep in the rocks. Claire slid from her horse, legs shaking from adrenaline and fear. "What did you witness?" she asked, her voice steady despite everything. "What's worth all this killing?" Jake looked at this brave woman who'd stitched him up and fled with him without hesitation. She deserved the truth. "I saw the Kane gang murder a federal marshal and his family outside Dodge City. The marshal was transporting evidence about a corruption ring that goes all the way to the territorial governor. Names, dates, payoffs. They killed everyone and burned the wagon, but I managed to grab the marshal's journal before they spotted me. He patted his saddlebag. This journal could bring down half the powerful men in 3 territories. Claire sat down hard on a rock. Sweet mercy. And you rode into town carrying that? I was dying from infection and needed supplies to make it to the federal courthouse in Santa Fe. That journal is my only insurance policy. Without it, I'm just another drifter they can kill and bury in the desert. How many are in the gang? Claire asked. 8 that I've seen. Maybe more. Jake knelt beside the stream, splashing water on his face. Their leader is Victor Kane. He's smart, patient, and absolutely ruthless. He won't stop until I'm dead and that journal is ashes. Claire checked his wound in the dimming light. The stitches were holding, but he needed rest and proper food. We can't go back to Red Creek. They'll be watching for us. And we can't make it to Santa Fe on our own with them hunting us. I know. Jake met her eyes. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You should have let me bleed out in your father's store. Don't talk foolish, Claire said sharply. I made my choice. Now we figure out how to survive it. They made camp in a shallow cave with no fire to give away their position. Claire shared dried meat and bread she'd grabbed from the store. They ate in silence, 2 strangers bound together by violence and impossible circumstances. Every sound made them tense. Every shadow could be Kane's men closing in. Tell me about Red Creek, Jake said eventually. What kind of life did I make you leave behind? Claire was quiet for a long moment. A safe one. A predictable one. I was the spinster daughter who never married because I was too busy keeping the town healthy. Everyone respected me, but nobody really saw me. Just the medicine woman who could stitch a wound and birth a baby. She looked up at the stars beginning to appear. I told myself I was content. Maybe I even believed it. And now? Now I'm terrified and exhausted and probably making the worst decision of my life. She smiled slightly. But I'm not bored, Jake laughed, then winced as pain shot through his shoulder. Well, if nothing else, I can promise you won't be bored. They took turns keeping watch through the night. Dawn came without incident, and they moved deeper into the wilderness, always heading southwest toward Santa Fe. Over the next 2 days, they developed an uneasy partnership. Claire redressed Jake's wound each morning and evening, monitoring for infection. Jake taught her how to shoot, how to read terrain, how to cover their tracks. They spoke little, conserving energy and staying alert. On the 3rd morning, they found the burned remains of a homestead. The family had been killed recently, within the last day. Jake recognized Kane's signature cruelty in how the bodies were arranged. This was a message meant for him. They're killing anyone who might have helped us, Claire whispered, staring at the devastation. These people died because of us. They died because Kane is a monster, Jake said firmly. Don't let him put that weight on you. That's what he wants. But Claire couldn't shake the horror. She'd spent her whole life healing people, and now death followed in her wake. That night she barely slept, haunted by the faces of strangers murdered to draw them out. Jake found her sitting alone in the pre-dawn darkness, tears streaming silently down her face. He sat beside her without speaking. After a while, Claire leaned against his shoulder. How do you carry it? The guilt of survival when others die? You remember why you're fighting. That journal represents justice for a murdered family and accountability for corrupt men who think they're above the law. Every mile we make towards Santa Fe is another chance to make their deaths mean something. That's not enough, Claire said quietly. No, Jake agreed. It never is. But it's all we have. Over the next several days, the landscape grew harsher and water scarcer. Jake's wound was healing slowly, and fever came and went. On the 6th day, they spotted riders on the horizon moving in a search pattern. Kane had brought more men and was covering more ground. The net was closing. We need help, Claire said, studying the distant figures. We can't outrun them forever. There's an old friend with a ranch about 20 miles south. Former cavalry scout named Henry Blake. If we can reach him, he might shelter us. Can you trust him? Jake considered. We served together years ago. He saved my life twice. But asking him to harbor fugitives from Kane's gang is asking a lot. They altered course, pushing the horses harder than was wise. By late afternoon, they saw the ranch. Jake rode in slowly, while Claire hung back with the rifle ready. A lean man with gray-streaked hair stepped onto the porch holding a shotgun. I heard you were dead. Not yet, Henry, though some folks are working hard on it. Jake dismounted carefully. Victor Kane and his gang are hunting us for something we know. I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to go. Henry was silent, then lowered the shotgun. Your woman looks about ready to fall off that horse. Get her inside. Henry's wife Martha fussed over Claire while Henry examined Jake's wound. You're lucky. Another day of hard riding and this would have torn open for good. Kane's men are close, Jake warned. If they find us here, they'll burn you out. Let them try. Henry's jaw set stubbornly. I didn't survive 20 years of fighting to let scum like Kane dictate who I shelter. Over dinner, Jake explained everything. The murdered marshal, the journal, the chase across territories. Henry listened without interruption. Kane works for powerful people, Henry said. You deliver that journal to Santa Fe, you'll make enemies in high places. I know, but the alternative is letting murderers operate with impunity. Noble. Also likely to get you killed. Henry paced to the window. Kane probably has men watching every approach to Santa Fe. You ride straight there, you're dead before you reach the courthouse. What are you suggesting? Claire asked. There's another federal marshal in a town called Silver Ridge. Smaller, off the main routes. If you can get the journal to him, he can get it safely to the proper authorities. A hope flickered in Claire's chest. How far? 3 days hard ride northwest. Rough country, but faster than Kane's men if you know the trails. I can draw you a map. They spent the night in Henry's barn. Just before dawn, Henry woke them urgently. Riders coming from the east. 6 of them. Claire and Jake were mounted in minutes. Martha pressed supplies into their hands while Henry gave Jake the map. They rode out the back way as Kane's men approached. The chase was on again, but now they had a destination. The terrain grew wilder as they pushed northwest. Twice they spotted dust clouds behind them, riders closing the distance. On the second day out from Henry's ranch, disaster struck. Jake's horse stepped wrong crossing a rocky slope, its leg breaking with a sickening crack. The animal went down screaming. Jake barely rolled clear. He drew his pistol and ended the horse's suffering with a single shot. The sound echoed across the empty land like a beacon. We have to move, Claire said, transferring Jake's saddlebags to her mare. They'll have heard that for miles. The horse can't carry us both for long in this terrain. She'll have to. Claire helped Jake into the saddle behind her. The mare struggled with the extra weight but moved gamely forward. Behind them, riders appeared on the ridge they'd crossed an hour before. They pushed on through the afternoon, the mare laboring with each mile. As sunset approached, Jake spotted something on the map. There was an old mission about 2 miles ahead. Abandoned but might offer defensive position. We can't outrun them anymore, Claire said, feeling the mare's exhaustion. If we're making a stand, better to choose our ground. The mission appeared as darkness fell, a crumbling stone structure. They rode through broken gates into a courtyard surrounded by deteriorating walls. It wasn't much, but better than dying in the open. They unsaddled the mare and let her drink from an old well. Jake checked his ammunition while Claire positioned their supplies. 6 bullets in his revolver, 8 in the rifle, and whatever courage they could muster. We might not walk out of here, Jake said quietly. I know. Claire loaded the rifle. But if we're going down, we're taking some of them with us. Torches appeared in the darkness, riders surrounding the mission. A voice called out, cultured and cold. Jake Carson. I'm impressed you made it this far. Victor Kane, Jake called back. Come to do your own dirty work finally? Kane's laugh drifted across the courtyard. I wanted to meet the man who's caused me so much trouble. And Claire Patterson of Red Creek. Your father sends his regards. Claire felt the words like a blow, but kept her rifle trained on the darkness. Give me the journal, and I'll let the woman live, Kane continued. She can go back to her quiet life. You have my word. Your word is worthless, Jake shouted. You murder families and burn homes. Because I'm practical. The woman is nothing to me. Make this easy, and she walks away. Jake looked at Claire in the faint starlight.
You could take his offer and trust a mass murderer?
Claire shook her head. I'd rather die fighting beside you. Something shifted in Jake's expression. When this is over, if we survive, there's something I need to ask you. Ask me now, Claire said, because when this is over, might be never. Jake took her hand. Marry me, not because of circumstances or survival. Marry me because in 6 days you've shown more courage than most people manage in a lifetime. When I look at you, I see the partner I never thought I'd find. Claire stared at him. It was insane. It was impossible. Yes, she said. Now let's make sure we live long enough for a wedding. Kane's patience ran out. Last chance, Carson. Come and take it, Jake called back. The first shots shattered the night. Jake and Claire returned fire, making each bullet count. 3 torches fell as men went down. They'd rush soon, try to overwhelm the position. The night dissolved into chaos. Kane's men tried twice to storm the mission. Both times Jake and Claire drove them back, but ammunition was running low and both were wounded now. A bullet had grazed Claire's arm and Jake had taken another hit to his leg. As dawn approached, they were down to their last few bullets. Kane's voice called out again. You fought well. But it's over. Surrender the journal, and I'll make your deaths quick. Jake looked at the leather pouch, then at Claire. An idea formed, desperate and dangerous. There might be a way, he whispered, but trust me completely. Before Claire could respond, Jake stood. You want the journal? Here. He threw the leather pouch into the courtyard. It landed in the dust, clearly visible in the growing light. Kane's men rushed forward, 3 converging on it, while others kept guns trained on the mission. Jake pulled a small glass bottle from his belt. Claire realized what he was doing a second before he threw it. The bottle shattered against the pouch, kerosene splashing across it, and the men reaching for it. Jake fired his last bullet. The spark ignited the kerosene in a whoosh of flame, engulfing the journal and the men around it. They screamed while Kane shouted orders. In the chaos, Jake grabbed Claire's hand. Run. Now. They fled through a gap in the rear wall, moving as fast as Jake's wounded leg allowed. Behind them, Kane's fury echoed as he realized the journal was burning. By the time he organized pursuit, they'd vanished into the canyons. They staggered through the morning, both bleeding and exhausted beyond measure. Finally, they collapsed in a narrow ravine. The journal, Claire gasped. All that evidence? For nothing? Jake pulled folded papers from inside his shirt, wrapped in oilcloth. The journal burned. These are the pages that mattered most. The names, the evidence, the marshal's testimony. I copied them by hand at Henry's ranch while you slept. The journal was insurance, but these pages are the real weapon. Claire started laughing, half hysteria and half admiration. You magnificent fool. You planned this? I planned for the possibility we'd need to sacrifice something to escape. Kane wanted the journal. I gave him one. Just not the parts that matter. Jake's face grew serious. But we still have to reach Silver Ridge. We're wounded on foot, and Kane will realize what happened soon. They rested for an hour, treating wounds with dwindling supplies. Claire's arm was painful but superficial. Jake's leg was worse. The bullet lodged in muscle. She couldn't extract it without proper tools. Can you walk? She asked. I can do what I have to do. Jake struggled to his feet, leaning on a makeshift crutch Claire fashioned from a branch. They walked through that day and into the night, following stars and Jake's sense of direction. Henry's map was gone, lost at the mission, but Jake had memorized major landmarks. If they could reach the Rio Salado, they could follow it northwest to Silver Ridge. On the 3rd day of walking, they were both feverish. Jake's leg was infected, Claire's arm swelling. They stumbled more than walked, supporting each other, driven by stubborn will alone. That afternoon they crested a rise and saw it, the Rio Salado, a thin ribbon cutting through the desert. Beyond it, maybe 5 miles distant, the buildings of Silver Ridge. We're going to make it, Claire whispered. I never saw the rider until he was almost on them, but it wasn't Kane. It was a federal marshal responding to Henry Blake's report about trouble in the territory. He took one look at the bleeding, exhausted pair and called for help. 2 hours later, Jake and Claire were in Silver Ridge being treated by a real doctor, while Jake's copied pages were locked in the marshal's safe. The evidence would go to territorial court, then federal authorities. Kane and his masters would face justice. Jake woke in a clean bed, his leg properly treated. Claire sat beside him, her arm in a sling. The fever had broken for both of them. The marshal says Kane's gang scattered when they heard we'd reached Silver Ridge, Claire told him. They're being hunted now. And us? Jake asked. We're free to go wherever we want. There's a reward for the evidence, enough to start fresh. Claire took his hand. So where do you want to go, Jake Carson? Jake looked at this remarkable woman who'd thrown away everything to help a stranger, who'd fought beside him and saved him, and agreed to marry him in the middle of a gunfight. I was thinking about a small ranch. Good water, defensible position, far enough from towns to have peace, but close enough to help if needed. He met her eyes. A place where a cowboy and a medicine woman could build something together. That sounds perfect, Claire said. But first, we need to make an honest man of you. They were married 3 days later by Silver Ridge's preacher, with the marshal and his wife as witnesses. Claire wore a simple blue dress bought from the general store. Jake stood without his crutch, determined to meet his bride on his own feet even if it hurt. After the ceremony, they sat on the boarding house porch watching sunset over the desert that had nearly killed them. Jake's arm was around Claire's shoulders, her head resting against his good side. "You know what's strange?" Claire said. "If you hadn't ridden into Red Creek that day, I'd still be there. Safe, predictable, slowly turning into a dried-up old woman who'd never really lived. And I'd be dead in the desert with my secrets," Jake added. "Or captured by Cain and tortured. So being shot, hunted, and nearly burned alive was good for us?" Claire smiled. "Best thing that ever happened to me," Jake said seriously. "I rode into Red Creek looking for supplies and a doctor. Instead, I found a partner, a fighter, and the woman I want to spend my life with." "Even though that life might be complicated?" Claire asked. "We've made powerful enemies. Let them come. We'll face them together." Jake pulled the folded papers from his pocket. "These are being transferred tomorrow. Within a week, indictments will start coming down. The men who hired Cain are going to fall. And Cain himself? Still out there. Still dangerous." Jake's jaw tightened. "But he's running now. His employers will cut him loose to save themselves. He'll be hunted by every lawman in 3 territories. Claire was quiet. "Do you think he'll come for us? For revenge?" "Maybe. Probably." Jake looked at her seriously. "I won't lie, Claire. The life I'm offering isn't safe or easy. There will always be risks." "Good," Claire said firmly, "because safe and easy was killing me slowly. I want a life that matters, even if it's dangerous. I want to build something with you, help people who need it, and face whatever comes together. Then that's what we'll do." Jake kissed her forehead. "We'll find our land, build our ranch, and live the life we choose. If trouble comes, we'll handle it the way we handled Cain. Together." The marshal approached with papers for them to sign, final statements about everything that happened. As Claire read through the account of their flight across the desert, she was struck by how much had changed in such a short time. 7 days ago, she was the spinster daughter of Red Creek, respected but invisible, living a half-life of service without passion. Now she was a fugitive who'd fought killers, a bride who'd married a man she barely knew, and a woman who'd finally discovered who she really was beneath layers of expectation and duty. "Any regrets?" Jake asked, watching her face. Claire thought about her father's store, her quiet room, the predictable rhythm of her old life. Then she looked at this scarred, limping cowboy who'd offered her freedom and danger and a chance to be fully alive. "Not a single one," she said. They left Silver Ridge a week later, heading south toward territory Jake knew from his cavalry days. They bought 2 horses with part of the reward money, supplies for a month, and tools for building. The rest went into a bank account for their future. The journey was slow, with Jake's legs still healing, but peaceful. They followed rivers and avoided towns, camping under stars and learning each other's stories. Claire told Jake about growing up the only child of a widowed shopkeeper, how she'd learned medicine from the old doctor who saw something special in her. Jake shared his past as a cavalry scout, the things he'd seen in the wars, the reasons he'd left that life to drift from town to town. "I was looking for something," Jake said one night by their fire. "I didn't know what exactly. Purpose, maybe. A reason to put down roots instead of just surviving day to day." "And did you find it?" "I found you. That's better than purpose. That's partnership." They found their land 3 weeks later, a valley with a year-round stream and good grazing. Remote enough to offer privacy, but within a day's ride of a small settlement that needed a medicine woman. Perfect. They built a cabin together, Jake doing what his light allowed and Claire handling the rest. It was hard work but satisfying. Each board they placed, each stone they mortared, was a commitment to the life they were creating. News reached them occasionally through traveling merchants. The evidence Jake preserved had indeed brought down corrupt officials across 3 territories. The territorial governor had resigned in disgrace. Federal marshals were still hunting Cain's scattered gang, picking them off one by one. 6 months after they'd settled, a rider came to their valley. Jake saw him first, his hand moving to the rifle by the door, but the rider's hands were up, showing he meant no harm. It was Henry Blake. "Easy, Jake," Henry called as he approached. "I come with news, not trouble." They invited Henry in, Claire serving coffee while Jake kept a cautious eye on him. "Cain's dead," Henry said without preamble. "Federal marshals cornered him outside Tucson 2 weeks ago. He tried to shoot his way out. Didn't work." Jake felt tension he'd been carrying for months' release. "You're sure?" "I saw the body myself. They wanted someone who knew him to confirm identification." Henry sipped his coffee. "It's over, Jake. You and Claire can stop looking over your shoulders. Claire's hand found Jake's under the table, squeezing tight. The nightmare that started in Red Creek was finally finished. There's more, Henry continued. The territorial government is offering you a pardon. Full and complete. They want to recognize your service in bringing down the corruption. You're a free man, legally and officially. What about the reward? Claire asked practically. Henry grinned and pulled a bank draft from his pocket. $5,000, a fortune. Enough to buy their land outright and build a real ranch. After Henry left, Jake and Claire stood on their porch watching sunset over their valley. Their valley. Their land. Their future. So what now? Claire asked. We're respectable landowners with a pardon and money in the bank. We could do anything. I was thinking we stick with the plan, Jake said. Build our ranch. You help people who need medical care. I raise horses and cattle. We build a life that matters. Sounds perfect. Claire leaned into him. Though maybe we could also build a bigger cabin. This one's getting cramped. Jake looked down at her, noticing for the first time the slight swell of her belly, the glow in her cheeks. Understanding dawned. Claire, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying we're going to need a nursery, she confirmed, smiling at his stunned expression. Probably by spring. Jake picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. A home, a wife, a child on the way. A life he'd never dared dream about when he was bleeding in a Red Creek general store. I love you, he said, setting her down gently. I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you for your courage and your kindness and your strength. I love you too, Claire said. For giving me a reason to leave and then a reason to stay. For being the kind of man worth fighting beside. They stood together as darkness fell over their valley, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes of violence and fear. Jake had ridden into Red Creek looking for supplies, desperate and dying. He'd left with a bride, a purpose, and a future he never imagined possible. And Claire, who'd spent 25 years being useful instead of living, had finally discovered what it meant to be fully, dangerously, beautifully alive. Their journey started with gunshots and blood, with desperate flight across an unforgiving desert. It nearly ended in a burning mission with killers closing in. But they'd survived. Together. And now, standing in the home they'd built with their own hands, with a child growing and years of partnership stretching ahead, they knew the truth. Sometimes the worst moments deliver us to the best moments. Sometimes running toward danger is the only way to find safety. And sometimes a stranger bleeding in a general store turns out to be exactly what you've been waiting for your whole life. The valley grew dark around them, but inside their cabin light spilled from the windows. They went inside together, closing the door on the past and opening themselves to whatever the future held. They'd learned the most important lesson. Life isn't found in safety and predictability. It's found when you choose courage over comfort, when you risk everything for what matters, when you stand beside someone and face the darkness. Jake had ridden into town for supplies and left with a bride who changed his life forever. But the truth was bigger. They'd changed each other, saved each other, and built something neither could have created alone. And that was worth every bullet, every scar, every desperate mile across the desert.